Welcome back, Be Health Empowered family. We are here for another week of Excuse Me, Doctor. I'm Dr. Melissa Clarke. Please call me Dr. Mel. I am your host and delighted to be back here with you this week. We're here every single week doing what we do at Excuse Me, Doctor, making sure that you have the information that you need to make wise health decisions for yourself, your family, and even your community. We're on Sirius XM channel 141 HUR Voices. And of course, we're streaming on YouTube and Facebook, taking questions live. So if you're a newbie to the show, and you're checking us out on YouTube, please hit that subscribe button. And if you're checking us out on Facebook, of course, please hit that like. I appreciate you for it. And also remember, put those questions in the chat. First come, first serve. We're going to get to them as we go through the show. And of course, keep your dial locked right there on Sirius XM channel 141 HUR Voices. Now, let us get into creating an amazing week for ourselves with all the health topics that we're going to cover tonight. But of course, in order to do that, I got to have my wonderful co-producers join me, Mr. Wayne Bruce and Miss Lila Mays.
Hey, howdy.
Hello.
Howdy.
Hey,
What's
how
going
y'all
on,
doing?
Dr. Mel?
Nothing much. Just glad to be here.
Me
Just happy
too.
to be in the number.
Indeed.
Absolutely.
Well,
So, what are we talking about tonight, Dr. Mel?
Well, we are still celebrating Happy Heart Month. So, we're going to be
Yes.
talking about the heart as the seat of our emotional well being. Everybody thinks
Okay.
that the brain is the main control center, but we're going to highlight a technique tonight that helps us be more resilient, recover from trauma, from heartbreak, and decrease stress in our lives all at one time. So, we're going to get into it
I'm
tonight.
about that. I'm about that stress-free life.
Right.
Gotta
Okay.
do
Yeah.
it.
I think
Before
we
we
all
do
are.
that, though, before we go in there, we have to do what? What time is it?
The weekly recap.
Yes. Come on, y'all. Come on. I like.
Okay.
All right. Well, we gonna start off with the numbers like we normally do. Wow. So with COVID, we have passed 930,000 deaths, and of course, over 78 million cases of COVID. But we know that's an undercount. Um,
Mhm.
and even though Omicron was allegedly mild, because it was so contagious and so many people got it, the daily death toll from the Omicron variant actually exceeded the death toll in the Delta wave. And we're
Wow.
still hanging out around 2,000 deaths a day. Still,
Wow. That's
even as
Whew.
people are talking
insane.
about opening back up and taking masks off, it's yeah.
Old
So,
California opening back up, huh?
yeah.
Exactly. I mean, everybody but us. As for me and my household, we will serve the Lord
It's
and be putting these masks on. Okay.
there you go. But
God
it's
gave
not
us
just
a mask
California,
to live by.
right? But it's not just California, it's Virginia. They signed a mandate that you can't have masks in schools there. I mean, of course, I don't know, Florida has never really done anything with masks, probably, but many other states are, and county by county, jurisdiction by jurisdiction, are coming off of mask mandates. Maryland also, in certain
Mhm.
places. So yeah, I mean, it's across the country.
Our- what, Wayne, were you going to say something?
It's amazing. I
It
mean,
is. It's amazing.
Yeah.
we seem to
But
get stuck
with
on stupid.
yeah, well, and we're gonna cover that in the tips for the in between times. But before we get
Mhm.
into that, I just want to mention that vaccination rates are up to about 68% for people over 5, which is good. In
Okay.
Some places it's higher than that, but, when you go county by county, there's some places that are still less than 55%. So, there's still some places that are kinda lagging along, and still work needs to be done there to get as many people vaccinated as possible.
Yep. All right. So facts. And you already sort of mentioned it, Dr. Mill. Let's get into these tips for the uh end time and in between time. Like
Hopefully not the end times,
we're-
just the in between time.
are we where are we? Like we're in
So
between surges, we're coming down numbers. Like what how do we stay healthy?
yes, absolutely. Where we're back in that space of people saying, "Oh, the pandemic is over." Um, and partially that's because lots of people got immunity, at least for a short period of time, by having Omicron. We know that cases and hospitalizations and even deaths are falling, but it's important to keep this in mind, the concept of community spread. People don't talk about that anymore, but that
Mhm.
really should be the guiding principle and not politics for making decisions about where and when to wear a mask. So, community spread is still high in over 90% of the country. Um, and there are over 3,000 counties in the country. Fewer than 50 of them have low spread. So, there's low, moderate, substantial, and out the wazoo is the top number, category for spread, right? We're still in that
Right.
out the wazoo high spread. Um, then there are about 200 counties that are somewhere in between low and super high. So it's really just those 50 counties that should be talking about doing away with mask mandates, but we see that's not
Right.
the case. Meanwhile, waiting in the wings is this BA.2 Omicron variant. So it's sort of a cousin to Omicron. It's 30% more contagious. We have more information about it because it's now in over 74 countries, including the US. It's only about
Lurking.
4%. Huh?
Lurking. Just lurking.
Just
Waiting.
lurking, right? Just hanging out, waiting. But it's only about 4% of the cases here, so that's good. And
Okay.
it may not take off like it's taken off in Denmark and a couple of other places because so many people just had the Omicron variant. So with our
Mm,
coupled with our vaccination rate, we're gonna keep our fingers crossed. So this is what the tips are, given all that. Use the
mhm,
science. Don't take the masks off indoors until community spread is low or maybe moderate where you live. Continue to wear your mask, and of course, we know the cloth masks really are not as accomplishing as much as the N95 and the KN95. So switch to those.
mhm.
If you get exposed, test 3 days after the exposure. It's not like a cut, it doesn't bleed immediately. You have to wait for 3 days for the virus to build up in your system if you did indeed get infected from your exposure, and then test, okay? And then, of course, get boosted. It cuts the risk of long COVID, it cuts the risk of hospitalization and death way down. So that's really important. And finally, continue to work on your underlying health. Do the 5 self-health actions that I talk about in Excuse Me Doctor, the book: sleep, stress reduction, hydration,
Mhm.
exercise or movement, and nutrition. So those are the
Okay.
tips for the in-between times.
All right. And I meant the meantime and in between time, not the end like E and D.
Okay. Thank you.
um
I was like, I know I
all
know
right.
Lila ain't going
No,
pessimistic
I'm
on
not,
me
you
now.
know I'm not.
Right.
So this is really interesting to me and like concerning long COVID is more common in women, huh?
Yeah, I was just with a friend over the weekend. She walked up a flight of 6 steps and was totally out of breath. It took her about 5
Wow.
minutes to recover. And, it turns out that she had COVID about a month ago, and that
Oh
is one of
wow.
her long COVID symptoms, shortness of breath and severe fatigue. So,
Hmm.
you know, while the severe cases of acute COVID hit men more than they hit women, about 1.2 times more. Long COVID sufferers tend to be younger and overwhelmingly female, about 60 to
Okay.
70% of the time. It turns out that long COVID seems to be autoimmune in nature, and we know other autoimmune diseases
Mhm.
like sarcoidosis, lupus, rheumatoid arthritis affect women more often also, right? And it seems that there's some kind of tie or relationship with estrogen. Estrogen seems to promote the tendency to form autoantibodies or have an autoimmune reaction,
Mhm.
while testosterone, on the other hand, seems to protect against it. The problem though with, long COVID being more predominant in women, you know how a lot of times when women have symptoms, they tend to brush it, they're tended
Mhm.
the healthcare providers tend to brush them off and say, "Oh, well, it's just depression or it's just anxiety. You're going to get over it," right? As opposed to really looking for a physical reason. And so there are a lot of researchers, thankfully, out there that are taking long COVID seriously, are trying to get to the bottom of it, and look for what is actually happening on a physical level and how it can be treated.
Okay. Great.
Yep. So that's long COVID in women.
All right. Brother Wayne, we can't hear you. Mm-mm.
Still can't hear you. What's going
You know
on?
why? You know why, y'all? You know why you
Why?
can't hear me? Because
Why?
my shirt looks like a test pattern. If you're watching this on YouTube or or Facebook, I'm looking at my monitor saying I have to fix that. Anyway, so look, I got a call this week from someone in my family who I just found out wasn't vaccinated, and they missed out on the job. They're in arts and entertainment, and they actually missed out on a job, Dr. Mel, because they weren't vaccinated. In DC, you can't go into the restaurants and clubs unless you show your vaccine pass and whatever it's called. I
Mhm.
don't know if it's called a pass, but
Yeah,
that
proof
you're
of
vaccinated.
vaccination. Yeah.
Right. And she said, well, she was taking a lot of supplements and a lot of sea moss, and she had only had COVID twice.
Wow. Well, if she was I mean, I think the theory behind that is that it boosts your immune system.
Right.
Um, and, it's good to have overall health because,
Right.
um, your immune system will be able to function better, but, vaccination um and a healthy immune system go hand in hand because that means the vaccine then has a healthy immune system to work with to produce antibodies. But as I always say, there's only two ways to make antibodies. One is to get COVID or get vaccinated. And
Mhm.
it's safer to get vaccinated than it is to get COVID because we're dealing with 930,000 deaths from COVID in the United States alone, over 5 million worldwide, and 10% of the people who end up in the hospital have no underlying health conditions and presumably have a healthy immune system. So, you know, I don't believe that specifically supplements have been, well, let me just say this, supplements cannot take the place of
Right.
vaccination, but can work hand in hand. But this
Mhm.
this is a question I get a lot, like which supplement should I take? So really I just wanted to talk about the fact that there are three sort of research proven supplements that we know actually help. One, probiotics. So the gut bacteria that you have, there's good gut bacteria and there's bad gut bacteria, and they have to be in balance. And the wider the variety of bacteria you have, that's associated with better health. You can get this from eating a healthy diet, especially a plant-based diet, but not everybody can stick with that. So sometimes it's good to take a probiotic, especially if you've been on antibiotics recently. So that's something, again, to talk with your doctor about taking. The other that's also associated, especially with good heart health and good brain health, are omega 3 fish oils. So those have been shown, again, to be beneficial for both heart and brain health. It can be gotten from a diet high in fatty fish, but if you need supplementation, talk with your doctor about it. That might be people who already know that they have heart disease. And then number 3, definitely not least, is vitamin D. We know that low vitamin D is associated with everything from worse outcomes from COVID to falls in the elderly, to
Mhm.
cancer and diabetes. There's not necessarily a causative link. It's just observed that people with those conditions have low vitamin D. So it's important to make sure your vitamin D is in the right level, get it checked by your doctor, take supplements if necessary. You can get it from sunlight. If you're the darker skin you are, the longer you have to stay out in the sun to make sure you get that vitamin D in. And you can also get it from fatty fish and flaxseed as well. So those are 3 definitely important supplements. Have that conversation with your doctor. Get them in your diet as much as possible, and, you know, focus on those.
Cool. You know, and sea moss doesn't hurt, I guess.
Yeah, it doesn't hurt. It's just there's not as much there's some research that
Hmm.
shows that it's helpful, but there haven't been large studies done
Right.
like with what the 3 that I just mentioned.
So this interests me this week, and when I saw it in the recap, I was like, yeah, it makes sense. I look at a lot of computer screens because being, one of the producers, we have to look at these screens a lot. So I saw something about pandemic eyes. Explain that, Dr. Mel.
Right. Not to be confused with Betty Davis eyes. But anyway, so more time on our computer screens is causing more people to become nearsighted, develop dry eyes, and have eye fatigue. And
Yep.
eye fatigue can often comes with headache or
Mhm.
eye aches. Um, I know a lot of people have been getting those blue light glasses. Actually, research doesn't necessarily show that they help. There's actually more blue light emitted by the sun than by computer screens. One of the best things, though, that you can do is to give your eyes a break. Use the 20-20-20 rule. So every 20 minutes, if you're working on the computer, look 20 feet away for at least 20 seconds. Um, and if you're working at the computer, it's probably even better to get up and, walk around, get outside, look around to give your eyes a break and get some fresh air at the same time. So that's the way to combat pandemic eyes. I'm looking at the
Okay.
computer screen too long.
And there you have it. The
Yes.
weekly, the weekly, the weekly recap. What's
Yep.
next?
Yeah.
I think it's debunk
You know.
time.
The weekly debunk, stopping misinformation in its tracks.
I guess this is Tony, Twitter fingers. He's Tanisha's cousin. They all start their family names with T's. So Tony says, did you know that over 10,000 people have died from the vaccine? No one is talking about it. It's just too many. I'm still not messing with it.
I don't know about that, Tony. Dr. Mel, is that true?
No. So, where that piece of misinformation might come from is the Vaccine Adverse Event Reporting Database, also known as VAERS, which has received 10,483 reports of death. That's as of the end of last year. Um, Now, what you see in the database just means that it was an event that happened after somebody got the vaccine. It doesn't mean that the vaccine caused it. So there are car accidents in there, there's stubbed toes in there are all
Mhm.
sorts of events. Anything that happened to somebody after they got the vaccine can get reported. So it offers that statistic of the 10,000 plus deaths offers no insight into the cause of death of those people. So, for example, if a 90-year-old nursing home resident got the vaccine and then died days, weeks, or even months later of another ailment, the resident's that person's death would still be reported in VAERS. So consider this. There are 10,483 deaths in that database out of over 500 million vaccines that have been given. So even if there was a direct correlation between the two, that's still 0.0022% of the total number of vaccine doses that have been given. But again, there's no causation just because it's in the database. What we do know is that more than 78 million US residents have been infected, and we're closing in on 1 million deaths from COVID specifically. Um, and so, again, the numbers pale in comparison. Getting, as I said there before, there's two ways to get antibodies to get COVID or to get the vaccine. The vaccine is way more safer than getting COVID.
All right.
So
There you
please tell
have it.
Tony that. I hope he's listening.
I hope he's listening too.
I hope he's listening. All right, that's it for us.
All right. Thanks, Wayne. Thanks, Lila. We're going to see you back in a minute. And we're going to go into the show. I just want to remember to remind everybody to make sure that you write your questions in the chat, because we're going to have a fantastic show and an even more fantastic guest. So, as I mentioned before, this is Heart Month. So, we're going to be sharing with you today the hidden power of the heart that doesn't get talked about a lot, but it might have tremendous effect in helping us have emotional balance in these turbulent times, in these uncertain times, in these times that we're going through, where there's a lot of grief and loss and need to be resilient. So tonight we have this wonderful, wonderful guest, Dr. James Miles. He's a senior strategist, human centric, who focuses on human centric performance and resilient communities. His passion is to help leaders, organizations, and communities fulfill their vision. He's an ordained minister, certified Reiki master teacher, and a Heartmath certified trainer, coach, mentor, and master teacher. So, welcome, Dr. Miles. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me, Dr. Mill.
So, I love to just jump right into this. When we think about the heart, we think about it as the seat of our emotions, and our language expresses that, right? He put his heart in it, or she's heartless, or I'm heartbroken, right? What do you have to share with us today about the connection between the heart and our emotions?
Yeah, Dr. Mel. So I love the idea of the power of the heart. We call it that superpower. It's our own private superpower. And while emotions are directly connected to the heart, sometimes we do it in the exclusion of the brain. And what we find is that the heart talks to the brain more than the brain talks to the heart. And when we can
Wow.
understand that basis, then what we get is the fact that we can understand how to get in touch with and even manage and manipulate our self-regulation from that heart space, so we can control and minimize the impact of emotions on us. Some call it stress. It can be called by other names, but we can do that from the heart space. And
Wow.
by doing so, when I can learn, particularly that nerve bundle, in fact, some will call it the heart brain. When I
Mhm.
can really manage from that heart space, it's and do it as simply a simple technique, a breathing technique, can help us manage it. Then we can bring down the impact of stress. We can open up the channel between our heart and our brain, and
Okay,
then we
well,
can access.
pause right there. Pause right
Yeah,
there, because we're getting into a lot of stuff right now. So you talked about the fact that the heart and the brain talk to each other. How
they
do
do.
they do that? How does that
Yeah.
actually happen?
So that vagal nerve, there's a nerve bundle that goes between the heart and the brain, that vagal nerve bundle. And so you'll
Okay.
find that between the heart and the brain, 80% those afferent nerve fibers are pointing up and the others are coming down. And so the
Okay.
heart, as we find that the heart actually, as it's beating,
Mhm.
when we are experiencing emotions, we're experiencing other stimuli, it alters the way the heart beats. The heart responds to that. So then that determines how open those channels are, and the heart starts sending signals. It's called the autonomic nervous system. And so we
Okay.
find that the distinction between the parasympathetic, which tends to be kind of the brakes or the slow down, the more rested, and
Mhm.
the sympathetic. Now, I'm oversimplifying, but the ideal of those two. And so from the heart space, we can then learn how to regulate ourselves so we can be
Okay.
more on one side or the other. And
Okay.
that
So
opens a channel up.
so let me just recap. So the heart and the brain communicate to each other through the nervous system. They're two branches of the nervous system, one that slows us down and one that speeds us up. I think people probably know that speed up one is the fight or flight response, right? The
Right.
sympathetic nervous
Yes.
system. And the parasympathetic one is the one where, if we're going to the bathroom or we're asleep or we're digesting our food, things that require us to be pieced out, that's the parasympathetic one, right?
Yes.
Okay. And you're
Yes.
saying that we can have control over this.
We can. So,
Okay.
for example, think about what happens when a typical person gets anxious, afraid. Generally, you start breathing more shallow and
Hmm.
quicker, and
Yep.
that's a stress response. And so, when you do that, then also that channel starts to narrow between the heart and the brain.
Okay.
Versus, if I can just slow that breathing down, even if I'm facing the same stress response or stimuli or that thing that scares me, if
Hmm.
I can slow my breathing down, it's in an average kind of resonant breathing around 5 seconds in or 5 seconds out. It may
Mm.
be a little slower, a little faster for some people, but around that space, then I can start to invoke a more what we call a coherent breathing pattern, which opens
Mhm.
that up. It minimizes the impact of that stress. It helps me to either minimize or avoid that fight, flight, or freeze response.
Mhm.
And then what it does also, it gives me greater access to my fuller thinking. They call it, cortical facilitation. I can then access more of my executive function, my thinking self. I
Mhm.
have greater access to it versus just reactionary. Uh,
So
uh, uh,
so in other
mhm.
words, if when you're more relaxed and fear isn't in control, you can think more clearly.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, how
Okay.
many times have we heard, or I've even said it, others, if only I had done this. I don't know why that,
Right.
or I'm not going to let them get to me. And then the next time they get to you again, there's a sense where our nervous system wires together and it becomes habitual, meaning that we start having
Mhm.
these automatic reactions to external
Mhm.
stimuli. Well, by practicing more of the just on the simple side, these coherent breathing techniques, you can
Mhm.
start to slow it down, regain control of that, and then instead of being in an automatic reaction, you can put yourself with what we sometimes call the slow track, which is still extremely fast, but you
Mhm.
can put yourself in a sense where you're more in control of that, and we call it creating a choice point versus just this
Okay.
automatic reaction.
Is that when people say, "Oh, I got triggered by that." Is that what you're talking about? Like
That's
when
perfect.
something
Perfect.
that has caused a trauma to you in the past, you encounter it again, and you automatically sort of go back there to that fear that you had. Is
Absolutely.
that what you mean?
Absolutely. In fact, in some of our training, we'll talk about it. Say you were bit by a dog when you were younger.
Mhm.
And so now you have this just innate fear of dogs.
Mhm.
Much later, it could be even 20 years later, you see a dog that is the most playful, wouldn't harm a flea, but your
Mhm.
body goes immediately into the stress response, and now you react out of that, and it's impacting you.
Right.
You're absorbing all of that just the dump of all those hormones into your body that are just the body is designed to do that, but it's not designed to sustain that over long periods
Mhm.
of time. And so
Mhm.
when you can slip and exercise a more coherent breathing pattern, then you can give yourself just a couple of seconds to see that this dog does not seem to really be a threat. And so
Mhm.
let me just kind of chill.
Okay.
That
No,
that
that
dog
makes
over
sense.
there might eat my
Right.
finger off, but this one right here is fine.
Okay, I got you. I got you. Now, I've heard about this concept of heart rate variability.
Yes,
Can you break that down for us? And how does
absolutely.
that relate to stress and all the things we've been talking about?
So a lot of the times we go to the doctor, we'll find out what the beats per minute are with our heart,
Mhm.
and some would think that the heart is steadily beating at that rate, when actually that's not. It's an average. And heart rate variability is the beat to beat difference. So it's a
Okay.
difference between heartbeats. And
Mhm.
the significance there is that heart rate variability, or HRV, is a wonderful indicator of obviously the rhythm of the heart and a stress response. What emotions are we experiencing? In fact,
Okay.
in some cases, through biofeedback and other instruments, power spectrum density meters, you can look at somebody who's actually, skilled at it, not just the average. You can look at that and have a sense of one, whether you're in a stress response or not. And to some extent, there were some studies that say, 50 to 70% accuracy on even determining what that emotion might be that you're
Wow.
experiencing.
Okay. So, is it better to have a low amount of variation in your heart rate or a lot of variation in your heart rate? What's better?
No, so it's better to have more variation in your
Okay.
heart. And so, in fact, when we run tests, we often try to find a younger person, because as we age, the HRV, or that heart rate variability, does get lower. Or as we're in some other type of disease state or some other impact on the body, then we find that the HRV, or heart rate variability, will come down.
Mhm.
And so we want that to be more dynamic, a little bit more robust, because you can look at the wave patterns that are coming back, and that wave pattern, and particularly the smoother it is, then generally it's a proxy for your coherence, or that channel between the heart and the brain. And you can
Okay.
find that the smoother it is, the more open that channel is, and then the more grounded and settled or rested you may be. There
Okay.
is a caution, though, and that is the fact that there's a distinction between relaxation and when we talk about that parasympathetic, or that grounded heart rhythm. So when we work with, say, Olympic athletes, you know, fighter pilots, first responders, EMTs, medical technicians, you do not want them relaxed when they're trying to
Right.
serve you. It's just,
Right.
but the ideal of being very coherent, yes. And so the idea,
So
you
what do
can
you
be
mean by
coherent.
coherent? You mean when you say you want them coherent, what does that mean?
When you say coherent, that means that the heart, the brain, and the emotions are lined up.
Got
And
it.
so
Okay.
in that sense, in which, if I put it in practical terms, I served in the Marine Corps for a while.
Mhm.
I served in ministry. There are these response positions, as yours is, Dr. Mill. And the
Yeah.
ideal is that there's a point when one of the language we use is in the zone. When
Mhm.
somebody's in the zone, they're fully their response able. They're fully connected and aware. They're situationally aware. Their training, their experience is all coming in. Um, and we could say that they're in a more coherent zone versus, someone reacting, scared, etc.
Mhm. Got it. Got it. Okay. All right. And then you mentioned that biofeedback can be used. How does that figure into this?
Yeah. So we have, inside the Heartmath system, is a device called Inner Balance that was actually designed by DARPA. As many know, that there's a lot of equipment, tools, weapons, and others for the U.S. military. But this
Mhm.
device um, will pick up your HRV. And what it
Okay.
does now is that, so when we do training, for example, we'll do a skill building workshop, and then we'll invite that person to use biofeedback to really see what coherence feels like for them. It's going to feel
Okay.
different for all of us. So by looking at the feedback, it'll let them know, one, are you in a coherent state or not? So we have meters that will let you know whether you're in a high, medium, or low state of coherence. It
Mhm.
will then take an algorithm that looks at the level. There's 4 levels of challenge. It'll look at the level of challenge, the time you're exercising, and meaning exercising that vagal nerve bundle, and the state that you're in. What's that emotional state that's coming through, and give you a score. So then that means that if I started out today, that I can get an achievement score of 100. That comes out of this algorithm. Then I'm learning what it feels like to really get into a coherent state. Then I can practice it in the same amount of time, um, that I can actually maybe achieve 200 points in achievement. So it gives you a chance, just like you would exercise any other muscle, you can
Mhm.
exercise that nerve bundle and start putting the power, using your own superpower. I love the way you started out. You can start exercising your own sense of power over that heart space and open that channel up, even when you're facing challenges.
Got it. So, can you give us some examples of some of the skills that or techniques, I should say, to increase that communication between the heart and the brain and achieve this coherence, this space where you're in the zone, right? And you're
Oh,
not triggered by past traumas, etc. What are some of those techniques?
sure. So one is called quick coherence. And there's two key steps. The first step is that shifting your physical state into that more open, coherent state. So it's focus your attention in the area of the heart. Imagine your breath is flowing in and out of your heart or chest area, breathing a little slower and deeper than usual. 5 seconds in, 5 seconds out, or whatever pace is most comfortable. So that's step one. And by just doing that alone, you start shifting yourself more towards a parasympathetic state, as we talked about, that more relaxed, more grounded, almost situationally aware. Then step two is really important. And this is where the emotions really come in. We invite people to think about something that really gives you an upbeat feeling. What's an experience that when you think about it, you smile, but you can still experience the joy or the upbeat nature of it. We call those
Okay.
renewing emotions,
So
because
right now I'm
emotions
on the
can be.
beach. Right now I'm on the
Oh,
beach with my toes in the sand, and the sun is beating down on me, and somebody's bringing me something with an umbrella in it.
I'm loving it. I want to be there too. And so then what we say is, okay, Dr. Mel, you're on that beach, you're feeling the water. Can you feel it? Don't just think about it. Remember, that's up
Mhm,
here. We want to drop down. Can you feel it? And you
mhm.
can, and usually there's a sense. If you can do that, then we go into step two. And say, okay, make a sincere attempt to experience a regenerative feeling, such
Okay,
as appreciation or care for someone or something in your life.
okay,
So, in those two steps, the first one, what we call a heart focused breathing, you shift your body state into that more coherent open channel between the heart and the brain. In the second state, then you bring in an empowering emotion that you can sense. Now what that does is that further empowers that open channel and helps you
mhm,
to sustain it. Now when you practice that, what it does now is that it starts retraining your nervous system. So now that it starts
okay,
responding more readily in a parasympathetic versus a sympathetic, or it starts responding in a more relaxed versus a stress mode.
mhm.
And that technique alone, it takes all of just a few seconds to do.
Wow. So, how have you do you use this in your work with individuals or with communities? How does that play out?
Oh, absolutely. In fact, I just had a really exciting situation. So Comcast is one of the clients. We're working with one of the divisions in headquarters at Comcast headquarters, Philadelphia. One
Okay.
of the members of the group, we did basic training. In fact, we did it online to show you how really accessible it
Okay.
is. We did it online, and then we had coaching sessions. So one of the managers had to go to Paris to be with her daughter, who was going into medical school, and she had to take
Okay.
some exams. So she said, okay, she had the biofeedback tool. She wanted her daughter to get this, so I agreed to do a session when she got to Paris. And I just heard back from her and said that her daughter felt like just practicing the breathing technique helped her settle down and calm down the nerves of these exams, that she did well. And so she's advancing. That
Wow.
was one
Wonderful.
example. So two things are being said there. One, the mother experienced a shift in her work relationships. And she
Okay.
said, I want my daughter to experience that. There was so it was one situation that just got that feedback. Another one is that we work with youth also.
Okay.
And so I was working with a group of kids over on the west side of the city. And
Which
I,
city is that?
I'm sorry, West Chicago, on the west side of
Okay, got it.
Chicago. And Dr. Mill, I'm going to be so candid. I thought I was flunking with these kids. I just
Okay.
thought that they were not, we weren't going any place. I was teaching the techniques, and they were in a program where they had to go into the community and be basic community reporters, journalists, capturing stories of the people in the neighborhood. I love that.
Mm-hmm.
But the issue they were having trouble embracing their own story. They were afraid of being respected and all kinds of things. So we taught a technique that deals with communication and how you can get coherent and use that to actually change the tone and climate around you.
Okay.
These kids came back and just said, "Oh my gosh, you teach us how to be powerful." And I mean, they had all these testimonies that I totally wasn't expecting, where they
Wow.
felt so strong and that they could sense the difference. And I said that this is the Holy Grail. This is what we want to see, is our
Mm-hmm.
kids being able to do that.
Yeah.
I'll share a piece about that is that we know from our research, Heartmath has been in this research side for just under 30 years,
Mm-hmm.
that
Okay.
the heart, you can, using standard magnetometers you find in medical spaces and others, the heart beat, the signals from the heart, the electromagnetic signal can be picked up at least 3 feet out from the body, whereas the
Wow.
brain signal is within inches. So the strength of the heart. So the idea that we were helping these kids understand is that when you're feeling something, this ideal of a vibe, there is science to back that up. You
Mm-hmm.
are, and then at the same time, just because you have a smile on your face, don't think others aren't picking up that
Right.
underlying attitude. And so
Right.
when we can show and help them with that, then they started realizing that just by regulating themselves, they could change the mood of an interaction without doing anything else. And
Wow.
then they can trust their instincts. They can start tapping in and really being able to capture what they're picking up and then do something with it, whether it's for improved, interaction, communication, connection, or protection.
Wow.
And they
That
just
is
loved it.
fascinating. That is fascinating and really powerful. I can't believe that it's actually we need to bring the audience into this, right? It's time to do that. And
Sure.
so what Wyla and Lane, Lila and Wayne, please come on back in. I've renamed you all, right?
Yes.
Because I'm just so taken by some of the stuff that Dr. Miles is telling us. So
Wow.
do we have
Yes.
any questions
Okay, well,
live
I'm
or
gonna jump.
Go ahead.
Yes, I'll jump right in. Um, uh, Dr. Miles, can you go back into parasympathetic state and just break that down for some folks who missed that explanation?
Yes. So in its most basic structure, the autonomic nervous system, which is our nervous system, it controls over 80% of our body functions, organs, and etc. There's two main branches, and so parasympathetic is one, and sympathetic is the other. Parasympathetic is like saying kind of putting on the brakes, slowing things down, whereas sympathetic is like hitting the gas pedal, speeding things up. And what happens is when I'm in a stress or fight, flight, freeze mode, then
Mhm.
my body's going to start speeding up. My heart rate's going to go up. I start to sweat, all the things that can happen. But that's a sympathetic, that's more sympathetic. Now, they both are active all the time. It's really which one is dominant. And
Okay.
so when I'm in a sympathetic state, then it's my body ready to jump, run, move, or it's that freeze. On the other side, parasympathetic is how you have that place where you can go and just relax. Dr. Mel talked about the beach, feet in the
Mhm.
water, a glass coming with an umbrella in it. Well, there's a sense in which she's in a chilled state. 9 times out of 10, she's going to be more parasympathetic, where things are more relaxed, unless she's worried about something else and is waiting for that umbrella to get there to help out. But the ideal is that's kind of a simple distinction. There are other layers that get a little more involved, but that's the basics of it.
And you
Okay.
Okay.
want them to be in balance. You don't want the sympathetic, that fight or flight to be dominant, because that's what leads to chronic stress, right? And
Mhm.
high
Yes.
levels of stress hormones, which are associated with, you know, inflammation in our body and disease, all the chronic diseases that we hear about when we're in that overdrive state too much, which, we live in this world where we're overstimulated and we're
Mhm.
always worrying about something and something's always getting our attention. If we're always in that state, that is what leads to poor health down the line.
Right.
Mm.
In fact, we did a session for caregivers,
Hmm.
and the ideal of overcare, was that led to this kind of hyper vigilant, sympathetic response, and we had to work with them so that they can change their own state and therefore impact even those they were giving care to.
Wow.
Hmm.
Mm,
So we have a question
interesting.
from uh, Ellen Claire Lamb. If we actually fall asleep while trying to reach a parasympathetic state, something that happens to me, does this defeat the point?
Great question.
Yeah, it really
Dr.
is.
Wow.
Now you're getting into those other layers. I would not say it defeats the point, but there's a difference between relaxation and that coherence, that stronger coherence that comes to a parasympathetic state. So if I'm falling asleep, then there's a good chance that I'm could be coming out of that, and I'm just falling asleep. My whole body is could be shutting down, but I could still be in somewhat of a stress state even as I'm falling asleep.
Mm.
Okay. So we have another question from Irene Nelson. Actually, she says it's more of a statement. This technique sounds like it'll work wonders with anxiety.
Absolutely, absolutely. One of the
Have you
things that,
seen
in fact,
examples of that?
yes. So we do work with intuition, and I want to make this statement first and then come back. When we do that, we let people know, like if you notice when I gave you the second step, I said make a sincere attempt.
Hmm.
The ideal is you don't want to create more anxiousness trying to make the technique work. You want to be able just to relax. And what the techniques do is they start retraining our nervous system, and they start raising our consciousness to what state we're in. So then something as simple as, am I experiencing emotional drain? You know, I mean, how many times have you been around someone, the simplest one, one person, you leave them and you just feel like, man, I can lift 100 pounds. Another person, you feel like I just lifted the world and I was only with them for 5 seconds. You know,
Right.
this idea that we start raising our consciousness to the fact that I can be aware of this and I can do something. So anxiety does not have to rule the day. And then number two, I'm starting to, slowly but surely train my nervous system. Now, of course, if the person does need more advanced care, we definitely encourage them to get that counseling or care they may need in addition to practicing the techniques.
Okay. So I have a question from Tracy Caldwell in Los Angeles. What is the distinction between heart math and meditation?
Yeah, it's a great question. So, one Heart Math is actually an organization that teaches the social and emotional coherence and heart focused breathing techniques. Whereas
Mhm.
meditation, there's a quite a few techniques. One of the things that may come up is that meditation generally requires, most techniques in meditation require quite a bit of practice and over time. And in some cases, they require you to be in almost a protected space to be able to experience it. The HeartMath techniques are actually designed to be active and accessible, deployable, usable in any state. So
Okay.
for we work when we're working with easy examples is first responders or communities that are under stress. You don't have time to get away.
Mm.
Families that are under in some crisis. These techniques can work on the spot within 10 to 15 seconds. So it's designed to create a very active, situationally aware, proactive posture that oftentimes meditation, unless they're more advanced, may take more time to achieve.
Wow.
Right. Yeah, you kind of associate meditation with being by yourself and isolated and and it sounds like this is much more geared towards just functioning in the world but at a more I guess coherent level,
Yeah,
at a higher functioning level.
yeah. I
Okay.
can give you a very quick example that happened to
Mhm.
me. I was invited to come and speak to a group of police officers in Chicago. They called me and I changed my schedule because I work with where police and communities meet. I work at that intersection a lot, to
Okay.
bring down the stress on both sides. When I got
Mhm.
there, the gentleman in charge clearly didn't get the memo that I was invited and told me that basically we don't need you. I was frustrated. He was right in front of me, and my 20 years ago self would have had a different response. And so I immediately went into a heart focused breathing. He had no clue what I was doing because I knew I needed to start regulating myself before I let that start frustrating me or build up. And the goal was not him, but those officers who were learning how to do policing in community. That's really the goal, so we can start doing a better job. And so I was able to do that one within just a few seconds, and we came up with a nice outcome
Right.
that did
Okay.
not escalate.
So
And
so
that's
next,
a simple one.
so we're in actually in the lightning round here. So uh they coming fast and we're asking for answers faster. So we have Tracy Walls. Do you work with veterans? I work with a lot of veterans who seem to be in fight or flight mode all the time.
Wow.
Absolutely. Yes. In fact, we
Okay.
have a
You
mild
are you
injury
are a
program for
veteran,
veterans.
right?
I am.
Okay.
10-year
Okay.
United States Marine, but we have
Okay.
Thank you
veteran
for the
programs for them.
service.
Also, Irene Nelson, is there a website or contact information in reference to HeartMath?
Sure. Heartmath.org.
Heartmath.org. And there you have it.
Mhm.
And where can I read, Linda Hampton? I'm sorry. Where can I read more about this subject matter? And do you have a book?
So I do not have a book. We're actually developing that now. We're creating a metaverse and a book that makes it more immersive. But if you go to heartmath.org and go to the research tab, there is there's a plethora of studies and everything to support each section of the system and how it works and why.
What I found more the most fascinating one of the most fascinating things you said is just how the electrical activity of the heart reaches so far beyond the body than the electrical activity of the brain and how that's related to picking up vibes and intuition. So I'm definitely going to be reading more about that.
Absolutely. And then power spectral analysis will give you more of the specifics on how those things are measured.
All right.
Excellent.
James, is there a 60-second technique you can give us and
Sure,
our viewers to
sure. You
participate
ready?
in? Sure.
Focus your attention in the area of the heart. Imagine your breath is flowing in and out of your heart or chest area, breathing a little slower and deeper than usual. Find an easy rhythm that's comfortable. Thank you.
All right.
That's heart focused breathing.
Fantastic.
All right.
Wow. Well, that was incredibly informative. Thank you so much, Dr. Miles. I think everybody probably picked up something that they had never heard before from our discussion, and so I'm really, really grateful. Um, and
Thank you for having me, Dr. Mill.
Absolutely, absolutely. Before we go today, I just want to mention um, the opportunity for everyone, all our listeners, to participate in a research study. So all the Be Health Empowered family is eligible to do this. If you've ever heard me speak, if you listen to the show, um, it's done in conjunction. It's actually out of Howard University. They've asked me to invite anybody who is part of the Be Health Empowered family to participate in a COVID resilience research study. The participation is voluntary. It involves just filling out a 2-part survey, and you get $50 for each part. So up to $100 just for participating. If you're interested in finding out more, please contact my assistant, Dana Harvey, at danaharveyresearch@gmail.com. That's Dana, Dana, Harvey, Harvey, research@gmail.com. Or you can call 470-795-0329. That's 470-795-0329. Well, that is it for us this week. I want to thank, of course, Mr. Wayne Bruce and Miss Lila Mays as my fantastic co-producers. You can catch us right here next week on Excuse Me Doctor on Sirius XM channel 141 HUR Voices, or on Facebook or YouTube at Dr. Melissa Clarke or blackdoctor.org. Please make sure you tune in. And if I don't see you between now and then, please remember to be wise, to be well, and to be health empowered. Thank you so much for joining us.
My name is Dion Davis. I've tried to live my life with no regrets, but I guess my final regret is not getting vaccinated. Please, don't let not getting vaxxed be your final